speaker today is Elliot Freeman. He's Vice President of Business Operations at Independent Power, a Boulder-based solar power, heat pump, and battery company. Elliot today is speaking in recognition of Earth Day 2025. When we at Rotary think about climate change and environmental sustainability, we don't dwell on what's wrong, but rather what we can do to help. While there are important environmental challenges on the state, national, and international level, today Elliot will be talking about what we can do at the most local level, our own homes. Elliot will help us to understand how we can make our homes more sustainable, how we can reduce harmful pollution and save money at the same time. After years in the food industry and as an architect, Elliot made the switch to working on climate change because he felt the issue needed to be faced with courage and determination. Elliot has an MBA from the Kellogg School at Northwestern, a BA from Tufts University, and lives in Boulder with his wife, dogs, chickens, bikes, drum set, and woodworking tools. In fact, Elliot was telling me he made just about all the furniture in his home. So please give a warm Boulder Rotary Club welcome to Elliot Freeman.
All right, thank you, Meryl. Thanks for the introduction. Happy to be here. I've been to a few Boulder Rotary lunches now, and the food and the lemon bars are always amazing. Okay, so I figured today I'd share with you a little bit about my journey to figuring out how I could do my part to address climate change. And as Meryl shared, I live here in Boulder, and a few years ago, two things happened. One is that I was trying to figure out how I could take my own house and make it into a zero pollution household. And it was really hard. There was a lot of confusing information out there. I had a really difficult time figuring out what was the right approach, what were the steps to take, how much did things cost, and who were even the types of contractors that I was looking for. And the other thing that happened is, again, as Meryl pointed out, I decided to make a transition in my career to focus on the climate change space. I had been working in marketing for a long time, in food at places like Cliff Bar and Scratch Labs here in town, and PepsiCo and Clorox. And I just sort of felt like making granola bars and drink mixes was a little bit trivial. And meanwhile, we're addressing this huge issue of climate change, and I really wanted to spend my time focused on that. So I was lucky enough to find a company here in Boulder that sort of accomplished both options for me, called Independent Power, where they were a longtime solar installer, and they brought me on to help them figure out how to offer all the services that would transition a home to be zero pollution. So I'm going to walk you guys through that journey a little bit today. So I figured I'd start with the big picture, and this is literally like the biggest picture. This is the history of the Earth, which is about 5 billion years old, and talking about the carbon cycle. So I'm not a scientist, but figuring this out really helped simplify things for me when it came to what's going on with climate change today. And what's going on is that there is a carbon cycle, right? Where there's a fixed amount of carbon on Earth, and it's in different concentrations in different parts of our ecosystem. It's in the air as carbon dioxide, it's in our bodies and the bodies of animals and plants, it's in the ground, and it's really deep in the ground in the form of fossils and things like coal, right? In very dense concentrations. And over the history of the Earth, that carbon moves in different concentrations between those four entities, right? The plants, they suck in carbon dioxide from the air. When plants die and decay, that carbon goes into the ground, and then over millions of years, that matter that's decaying in the ground becomes fossilized. So there have been different points where we have higher concentration of carbon in the air or in the ground or deep into the earth, right? And the way that carbon gets from deep down in those fossilized areas back into the air is through natural things like volcanoes or, lightning causing a fire and burning that ground level matter. What's important about this is that there's basically a perfect correlation between the periods during Earth's history when there's been a higher concentration of carbon in the air and global temperatures. When there's more carbon in the air, the temperature goes up. And why this is important is because we're kind of getting to the end of this really nice, cool period where plant life and human life has thrived, right? So we're just looking at the past couple 100 million years here. And you can see that in the past very short amount of time, about 75 years, as a result of industrialization, we've really accelerated the rise in global temperature because our factors and our burning of fossils is putting so much carbon dioxide back into the air at a much more rapid rate than, natural volcanoes or ground wildfires would cause. And so this messaging that we've had, particularly with Earth Day and over so many years about Save the Planet is actually a little bit off. The planet's going to be just fine. It's been around for 5 billion years, and it's gone through many periods where it's been mostly, without life, with just, bacteria and single-celled organisms, periods where we've been in an ice age. But really, the issue here is that we need to save the humans, we need to save the animals, because that rapid rise in temperature is making this in a lot less friendly place for plants and humans and animals to exist. So we need to slow those rising temperatures, essentially by putting less carbon into the air, and we can do that by burning less stuff, essentially, so burning less fossil fuels. So where we all come in is, and where I started my journey in figuring out how I could address climate change, is just looking at the full picture of where carbon emissions are coming from today. And I was shocked to see that about 20% or 1/5 of carbon emissions are coming from our own houses, right? They're coming from residential energy consumption. And meanwhile, the technology exists today to bring that number to zero. So if we all hold hands and get on the same page, we can eliminate about 1/5 of those carbon emissions that are raising our global temperatures. So, this is not one of those let them situations from our words of wisdom. This is really a let us situation where we can address this, we can do it now. So let's talk about a typical home in Boulder and the energy consumption that we're all doing that contributes to this carbon dioxide that's going into the air. So you've got your electricity and your gas today, right? The good news is here in Boulder, we're getting our electricity from the grid from Xcel, and about 42% of that is coming from Xcel's owned renewable energy resources. They have a massive solar farm way out in the plains. They have a bunch of wind power. So all that energy that you're bringing into your house, 42% of that is renewable. That's great. The other 58% is not so great. That's coming from coal plants. And you can see, just from the picture, that's where all these carbon emissions are happening. All this carbon is going into the air. I was also surprised to find that so much of our household's consumption is actually coming from gas. So in this case, we're bringing natural gas, fossil fuel that got pulled out from deep into the earth into our homes, and we're literally setting it on fire. We're combusting it in order to generate heat for our furnaces and for our hot water heaters and for cooking on a gas stovetop. And the thing that I never thought about, and I'm sure most of us don't think about, is that those carbon emissions, they're happening right over our heads. There's essentially a tailpipe on our roofs. Here's a picture, it's called a vent stack, and that's where all that dirty, messy carbon is getting emitted right into the air around our homes, into the air that we breathe. And you can even see from this picture the discoloration on the shingles from all that kind of gross carbon that's coming out. So not great, both for the environmental situation as well as for our own health. So I'm going back a couple slides, but there was a Harvard public health study that came out a couple of years ago that basically said 1 in 5 deaths is from air pollution from these fossil fuels that are burning. I honestly think that's a little bit of an overstatement or dramatization. I mean, I used to be a marketer, so I know that game. But, I think the real interpretation of that is that, for those of us with lung or breathing conditions, our decline might be accelerated by the presence of carbon in the air or air pollution. So now we've talked about all this pollution that we're all causing with our homes. And of course, you're wondering, what can I do? So I'm going to walk you through that. Okay, first thing you can do is just try to stop burning stuff, and particularly stop burning gas. We saw how much that gas contributes to our home consumption and that pollution. So there are a few ways to do this. Number one is getting a heat pump to replace your furnace. I'm a huge advocate of heat pumps. I have one in my home. A couple quick things about heat pumps. They not only heat, but they also cool. So they replace your furnace and your air conditioner. They run on electricity, and they're a lot more efficient than gas or furnaces or gas boilers. Another thing you could do is get a heat pump water heater. Same idea. It runs all on electricity, and it's a lot more efficient than its gas counterparts. You can get an induction stovetop. This is the one that I have at home. I'll admit, I do on occasion miss that, sexy flame from my cooktop. But now every time I come across a gas cooktop, I think, what a mess. This is going to be a huge pain to clean versus my induction stovetop that wipes down really easily. And then a last thing you can do is next time you're replacing your clothes dryer, get an electric dryer instead of a gas one. So overall, where you can, let's switch from gas to electricity to electric powered appliances, because as we saw from Excel, 42% of that electricity is nice and clean. The second thing you can do is then to use less electricity. And this is by insulating and sealing your home. So I think about this like I think about dressing for winter, right? If you're going outside on a cold day, you're not just going to wear a sweater because all your body heat will escape. You're also not just going to wear a raincoat, which is a nice wind barrier, but it's not warm enough. You need that, nice Patagonia 3-in-1 jacket that's got like the puffy layer and it's got the hard shell, because that's going to let you stay warm and keep that warmth in. It's the same thing with your home. You need to add insulation, which is a very, very affordable way to significantly increase the efficiency in your home, and then also do some sealing. And I'm not talking about sealing through new windows or doors that are really expensive. I mean, this is sealing that can be done in your attic, in your basement, with just some very cheap mastic tape. I did some insulation and sealing in my home. It was less than $2,000. So this is a great way to reduce your electricity usage and your overall consumption. And then the third step is to add solar. So you can go from using just 42% of your electric load that's renewable to 100% by making your own energy at home. So that's kind of the 1, 2, 3 of how to get your home to zero carbon emissions, zero pollution. And I'm sure you're all wondering, how much does this cost? This all sounds like a lot. It's very expensive. And so here's where, my role at the company I'm at, Independent Power, this is real data. These are our real average project costs over the past 6 months on these various types of projects. Keep in mind, this is an average. Every home is different. We serve houses all across Boulder County and Denver County, but these are real numbers to give you guys a ballpark for what it might cost to take the steps to electrify and to bring your home to zero pollution. A big thing to point out, for instance, is our average heat pump project that's about $26,000. After all the rebates, the real true net cost is about $14,000. There's a federal rebate, there's a Colorado tax credit, there's an Excel rebate, there's a Boulder County rebate, and there's a City of Boulder rebate. It's 5 different rebates. What this should tell you is that everybody wants you to be switching to heat pumps, so much so that they're all taking cash out of their fiscal budgets and putting it towards this. Same thing with heat pump water heaters, a project that starts out at $7,000, after all those incentives becomes less than $1,000. With solar, we still have that 30% federal tax credit. I'll be honest, I don't know how much longer that's going to last. We're going to find out in a couple of weeks with the reconciliation bill, but that makes it dramatically more affordable to go solar. So I can share this presentation with this slide, but this is just to give you a sense of what a project like this might cost. And then I've also got a little thought exercise here, just comparing an investment in an electric vehicle versus an investment in converting your home to zero pollution. So here's the Tesla Model Y. Politics aside, this is a great car. This is the car that I drive. It's the best-selling electric vehicle over the past 2 years. This car starts out at about $50,000. After the federal and the state tax credits, it comes out to about $35,000. When you think about what's the average mileage of a typical driver and using that mileage powered by electricity, getting an EV like this is saving about 3.5 net tons of carbon per year. That's wonderful. This is amazing. Do that. This is a huge, huge environmental impact and major savings. If you compare that to converting your home to be pollution-free through solar and a heat pump, using our average costs on projects with my company, it's about the same starting price. It's about the same price after all those rebates, about $35,000. But when you think about all the emissions that you're reducing, bringing your carbon emissions from your home literally down to zero, it's about 7.5 tons of carbon saved. So 7.5 tons versus 3.5 tons, the delta there is equivalent of planting, almost 5 acres of forest per year and sequestering all that carbon. So for about the same price, there's a much bigger environmental impact. I get it. With the EV, you're getting a new car. It's fun. It's great. It gets you around. But with transitioning your home, you're putting a ton of value back into your home. You're modernizing it. So pros and cons. Ideally, we could all do both of these, but I just want to sort of paint the picture of a comparison when you're thinking about making that climate change investment. Okay, so I'll get ahead of a few FAQs just about heat pumps and about solar, since they always come up, and then we can go to Q&A. But with heat pumps, a question we get asked all the time: will this heat pump work in Colorado? And the answer is absolutely, definitely yes. Heat pumps are the most common heating element in places like Norway and Sweden and northern Canada. So yes, they can absolutely handle Colorado winter. Every heat pump that gets installed that qualifies for the rebates that I pointed out is rated to negative 13 degrees. That doesn't mean that it stops working when it gets below negative 13 degrees. That just means that's the point at which a heat pump becomes less efficient than a gas furnace. So heat pumps, they absolutely work in our climate. And again, they both heat and they cool. So it also replaces your air conditioner. Will I save money on my heating each month? The answer to that also is yes. It's hard to give you the exact amount, since Excel has all these kind of fixed fees and things like that. But from a per therm basis, in terms of energy consumption, when you compare gas rates to electricity rates, you should be paying about a quarter to power a heat pump with electricity that you would be by paying for gas to power your furnace. Are there good-looking mini split options? You get this question a lot. Mini splits sometimes are not the most attractive thing. This is actually a picture of my home. Oh, but that screen in the corner is blocking it. But they're ceiling units that can be relatively hidden. There are a lot of good options. There are more options every day. And then what should I ask a potential installer? I won't get into all this now, but there are a couple of smart questions that I can give to anyone that kind of helps you qualify who really knows what they're talking about. And then I just wanted to mention solar really quickly. Solar, the technology is improving so much even over the past couple of years. They have a lot more energy output per square foot, so you can get a lot more energy generated on your roof. They have less of an issue today than they've had in the past with things like shade and obstructions. And they also just look a lot better. You know, they're today, they're kind of this sleek matte black. They're not that silver grid that we've all grown accustomed to. And I'll just say, for solar, the technology is the best it's ever been, and the price is as low as it's ever been. That's unfortunately not going to last. I don't want to be a salesman or an alarmist here, but tariffs are coming. The tax credit is at risk. If you've been thinking about solar for a long time, it's kind of like get it while you can. So that's all I have. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions. I'd say beyond electrifying your home and bringing your home to zero carbon, some other carbon reducing tips I have just in general is, you know, of course, drive an EV if you can. Eat less beef. Beef is a huge contributor to methane emission, carbon emissions. Fly less if you can. Plant as many trees and plants and flowers and shrubs as you possibly can to pull some of that carbon out of the air. Have some discipline with AI. You know, AI, I know it's this very fun tool, ChatGPT, but it's very, very high consumptive in energy. And we're, you know, all those funny pictures that we're all creating is using a lot of our energy from the grid. And then educate yourself and get comfortable with nuclear. That's another very clean energy solution that's in the mist, that's gotten a bad rap, that could be a real path forward to finding an alternative to coal plants and other fossil fuels that we've been burning. So that's all I've got.
Thanks for speaking to us. I wonder if I could sneak in two very quick questions. Number one is, how do you get to the URLs for all those rebates you listed without being peppered by spam from all solar companies or going through about the first 10 pages of Google before you get to it? So that's the first question. Second question is, there's a technology called, of course, forget it now, passive solar irradiation. It popped up on a TED talk about 5 or 6 years ago, which the sun comes in, hits it, and it bounces out and goes straight through the atmosphere out into space and is gone, and it actually cools down the roof. Have you heard anything about that, and why is it not mainstream for everybody that gets a new roof? So, two questions.
Sure. To the first question, so your federal and your Colorado tax credits, those are just through your tax filing. So you don't have to go to any URL there. You just have to pull up you have to ask your tax preparer to add the appropriate form. So for the IRS, it's form 5695, and for Colorado, it's form DR1307. I know it's embarrassing that I know that, but I do. For the Excel rebate, your contractor will apply for that on your behalf. So again, nothing you need to do there. For the city of Boulder and Boulder County rebates, it's one website. It's called EnergySmartYes.com. It's facilitated by Boulder County. I'll say that again, EnergySmartYes.com. There's a woman named Rachel on the other end of that. She's wonderful and very easy to work with. So no more searching for you. The second question about that particular kind of solar technology, I'll be honest, that doesn't sound familiar to me. I'm pretty anchored in the residential world. I say that our residential panels are designed for a residential application where they need to be able to withstand hail and wind and things like that. There's a lot of great solar technology that's on a utility scale or that's getting installed in places where they don't have the same infrastructure that we have here in the US, like in parts of Asia and East Africa, where their roofs are made of different things. So, there's a lot of great technology out there. I think the more the better. But, there's only certain applications that really make sense with the residential, shingle and tile and standing seam roofs that we have here in Colorado. Oh, I think you need.
Yes, my name is Wayne Ottinger, and I'd like to first tell you that I knew Bill Anders, worked with him as he flew in 1965 my lunar landing research vehicle. And I don't know if you knew his post-astronaut work as chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and then CEO of many major
Okay.
corporations after that. But more important, in 1980, I built a passive solar home. And it was about 7 or 8 miles off the coast of Oceanside, California. And that 2,400 square foot all-electric home, I was able to get over a period of 8 years that I owned it, $35 a month total energy costs
Wow.
with an all-electric, and had trome walls, which produced all the heat I needed and more. I had to even put panels on to shade to cut down the incoming heat because of that. But I had a couple of active solar panels I used for hot water and for heating a spa thermal siphon. And so it was published in Sunset Magazine in 1981.
Wow. Congrats.
Hi, I got a question about insulation. I mean, how do you really insulate the walls that are already created?
Yeah. So to be honest, you're getting 80% of your insulation needs if you just do your attic and your basement or crawl space. The walls, you can poke holes in the walls and add insulation between the studs. What this means is that you're putting a small hole in between every stud, and then you're, have a drywall patch. So that doesn't make sense for a lot of homes, but again, you can make a huge difference in your home efficiency just blowing some R29 into the attic or something like that. So I would probably, just practically speaking, skip the walls, but do your attic, do your crawl space, get that taping on your, joists and all those things.
I noticed in the costing for that, like using one of the examples with the water heater, I think was $4,800 and $800 and something dollars, under that for once you do the rebates, et cetera. If Independent Power or a company like yours, manage that process where you would come and say, we did all this stuff like that, and here's your $868 bill? Or does the individual homeowner, et cetera, have to file each one of those separately and that kind of thing?
Yes, so there is a little bit of a time lag to answer that question. So, again, the customer pays I think it was $6,800 up front. And then at your next tax filing, that's when you can claim those tax credits. The Excel rebate usually comes within 8 to 10 weeks, and the Boulder County, Boulder rebates also come in, 5 to 10 weeks. So, you do have to lay out the money up front for, customers that need to. They'll, do some financing or something like that, bridge that gap, or they'll tap into a HELOC if they need to. But yes, there is a little bit of a time gap between that net price and the initial project price.
You mentioned the walls and how much you're losing as a percentage of the house. What about doors? My front door, I have about a 40-year-old house, but front door's beautiful, but we get a little bit of an air leak underneath the front, and we end up throwing down sort of a seal or a sock for a door during the coldest days. But also the back door in the garage. I know that sounds kind of silly, but it almost seems like a waste to replace the door when it doesn't have that much of a leak. But what is a leak that you can see air through? What kind of loss do you have in a house? It's got to be massive.
Yeah, great question. The way to get a True answer to that is to get an energy audit and get a blower door test, which will literally, give a numeric factor to the degree of sealing or leakiness your house is. But, as I've learned with woodworking, if you've got a little bit of confidence and a little bit of YouTube, you can solve pretty much any, any home issue. I think you could probably go to McGuckin's and get some sealing tape or some sort of, rubber barrier to the bottom of your door that really addresses that. But if you do want a home energy audit, you can get that for free. You can get it through Excel. There's also a group called Go Electric Colorado that does home energy audits for free. So if you're curious about any of that stuff, how well sealed is my house, do a blower door test. It's, it takes a half an hour and it's free and can inform you, where your leakage is.
Yeah, thanks a lot for coming. I really like Independent Power. I've worked with them in the past, so thank you.
Good.
One of the problems we ran into, our house was built in 1984. It has 100 amp service.
Yep.
We've added solar. We have an electric car. We're using a 40 amp circuit to do that. We have an induction stove, and now we have a heat pump. We're out of space.
Yep.
And if we want to do more, we have to upgrade our whole house. So I think you need to add that to your presentation to say that for those who are retrofitting homes, there are hidden things that you got to deal with.
Yeah, so you're referring to a main panel upgrade. So most homes in Boulder had an 100 amp panel or 125 amp panel, and upgrading that to 200 amps is something that's often required. That's part of these average project costs that I shared. So many of those projects included a main panel upgrade. That costs about $4,000 to $5,000. Rebates also apply to them. So those were included in those average costs.
Hello, thanks for your presentation. It's very good. Is there some controversy about whether heat pumps actually work at 13 degrees below minus 13 degrees Fahrenheit? I just put in 2 heat pumps in my house and I get the XL rebate, but the contractor said you have to turn on your furnace at under 40.
Yeah, so here's the thing. A lot of HVAC installers run very lean and they don't really have the capacity to train their staff on a new technology. So this is what I experienced when I was out shopping for heat pumps for my home. A lot of contractors are saying heat pumps don't work, you still need a furnace. Why are they doing that? Because they know how to install furnaces, they know how to maintain furnaces. There is no question that heat pumps that are appropriately sized for your home will work to whatever degree Colorado throws at us. I am 100% confident in that. So to me, there's no controversy, but again, I had, of the 4 bids that I got on heat pumps, 2 contractors, came in and said, heat pumps actually don't work. Let me sell you a furnace, because that's what they know how to do.
Thank you for being here today. I work with supply chain and have worked for a solar company in the past.
Oh, nice.
So I'm curious, where do you manufacture solar modules and how is the tariff impacting you today and how will you mitigate that?
Yep. So actually good news is that a lot of solar panels are manufactured here in the US. In fact, this could be one of the things that saves the IRS tax credit, is because one of the biggest solar manufacturers is in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district, and I'm sure she doesn't want to see that that manufacturing go away. So there's a lot that's being produced domestically. There's definitely a lot from China. Our company installs a solar panel called Q Cells, which is manufactured here. The thing with tariffs is that generally prices go up across the board, whether they need to or not. To be totally honest, and when I was at Scratch Labs during COVID, we saw all of our competitors take up their price on their food products because some of their inputs increased. But We didn't have to do that, but we did it anyway because we wanted to maintain our premium positioning in the marketplace and because it's where the supply-demand curve shifted to. So I think it's less relevant where things are actually manufactured because I think, unfortunately, prices are just going to go up across the board. But that's just my take, and I'm not an economist.
Do we have any more questions in the room? Okay.
Elliot, thank you so much for speaking to our club today. It's very interesting and very important for all of us here in Colorado. Rotarians are very environmentally conscious, and we're also very conscious about human health. We have been working to eradicate polio for the last 40 years, and we're very, very close. Just a few hundred cases, perhaps, worldwide, from many, many hundreds of thousands when we started the campaign. So in your honor, to thank you for speaking to the club today, we're going to donate 100 doses of polio vaccine to our Polio Plus campaign. So thank you very much.
Thank you.